Hello everyone, my name is Albie and today I'll be presenting on cardiovascular disease among South Asians in New York, the environmental determinants and vulnerabilities. So this presentation will explore how environmental, social, and cultural factors continue to contribute to cardiovascular disease risk among South Asians living in urban areas in New York City. So cardiovascular disease, otherwise known as CVD, remains a leading cause of deaths worldwide. For South Asians, cardiovascular disease risk means that it occurs earlier and progresses much faster than that compared to many other populations, not only in New York, but globally as well. My focus for this presentation today is how living conditions and environmental stressors in New York can intensify this risk of developing cardiovascular disease, and what public health actions can we as a public and as policymakers can take to help mitigate this. So first I'll be talking about the epidemiology of cardiovascular disease in South Asians. Research has consistently shown that South Asians face a 2 to 4-fold ratio of higher risk of having heart disease. South Asians also develop cardiovascular disease 10 years earlier than populations such as Caucasian and others. In New York City, South Asians represent a growing immigrant group, and we see these disparities reflected in the healthcare data. So why particularly South Asians in New York? Well, 3 reasons. First is location. South Asians form one of the fastest growing ethnic groups in New York City, mainly concentrated in Queens, Brooklyn, Bronx, and these include populations from locations such as India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan. Second is density. Urban stress, crowded housing, and dietary transitions all combine to elevate cardiovascular disease risk. And so as such, high-density living conditions furthermore contribute to increased exposure to environmental stressors. And lastly, it's stress. Many individuals work long hours. It is a high-functioning city with high-stress jobs, which contributes to limited time for exercise, and all in all, further compounds this population group's vulnerability to cardiovascular disease. Moving on to further talk about environmental factors that exacerbate vulnerability for this particular population. So first I'll talk about the causes and the results. First, air pollution and vehicle emissions both increase inflammation and blood pressure. Green spaces, rather the limited resource of green spaces within the city, restrict opportunities for safe walking or recreation. Heat exposure in densely built areas also place stress on the cardiovascular system as well. And as mentioned before, occupational stress can contribute to hypertension and decreased mental well-being. Social and environmental factors also can shape outcomes. Many South Asians lack health insurance or experience language barriers, which prevents them from accessing care. There's cultural stigma surrounding chronic illnesses, which furthermore often prevents individuals from seeking timely care as well. Additionally, most public health messages are not tailored to this community's linguistic and cultural needs. Okay, moving on to cultural and environmental factors. So cultural has both protective and risk-enhancing effects. If we start with family support and collectivism in many South Asian cultures encourage strong community ties, which allow one to feel supported during their disease onset as well as disease treatment. However, if we talk about traditional diets, these diets are often high in ingredients such as oils and ghee and refined carbohydrates, which all in all can contribute to the risk of developing cardiovascular disease. It is important to note that some cultures can also rely on traditional remedies over medical advice, thus delaying formal medical treatment and thus exacerbating the onset of cardiovascular disease. And lastly, I would like to talk about representation, as there's a limited representation of South Asians in the healthcare workforce, which can be caused by a multitude of factors, but can also underrepresentation, as healthcare providers are not culturally sensitive or culturally trained to provide care to the specific group of people. Okay. Moving on to biological and genetic factors, I'll start with genetic. So genetically, South Asians are predisposed to obesity and insulin resistance, and this population tends to accumulate fat around the abdomen, even at lower BMIs, as well as family histories of diabetes and heart disease further exacerbate inherited vulnerability for this population. So here we have a graph and a table. I'll start with the graph on the left. This shows mortality rates for cardiovascular disease in Asian American subgroups. If we focus on Asian Indian, which is the blue line here, we can see that it is significantly higher than all other ethnic groups in both male and female categories. And if we look at the table to the right, specifically the body mass index for overweight and obese individuals. So we can see that New York City overall has a percentage of 57.3%. And below this are all the other ethnic groups and their percentages of overweight and obesity, the BMI of greater than 25. And if we look at South Asian, we have this group has the highest percentage for overweight and obesity, almost matching that of New York City overall. Behavioral factors. Lifestyle and behavioral factors furthermore add to risk of CVD among South Asians. This is due to long work hours and desk-based jobs, which limit physical activity and recreation. Furthermore, high intake of sweets and fried foods and generally traditional diets, which can further contribute to this risk as well. It is interesting to note that some of these cultures have consume intake of tobacco and betel nut, and these two food groups elevate cardiovascular risk further. I would also like to note that perhaps due to cultural factors or rather behavioral factors, there has been reported studies that show low engagement in preventative checkups or fitness routines as well. Yeah. So for these next two slides, I would like to talk about strengths and weaknesses. Starting off with strength, I'll talk about protective factors. As I mentioned before, the South Asian community's strengths lie in its strong social networks and family involvement, which can help support an individual throughout their treatment and disease onset. The health awareness, I'm glad to say, is growing, especially around diabetes and cardiovascular disease. Furthermore, many clinics in New York also now employ culturally competent providers and provide culturally sensitive training to its practitioners in order to aid certain communities. As in addition to this, there has been increased access to glucose monitoring and telehealth options for communities as well. So some weaknesses and barriers to health. Regardless of strength, there is still unequal healthcare access and cultural stigma that persists within the community. It is also important to know that many families still lack affordable insurance coverage, which can be a big hindrance towards accessing proper medical care. Dietary patterns remain high in refined carbohydrates and saturated fats as well. And furthermore, low health literacy, which can grow into misconceptions about chronic disease. And this all contributes to delay in proper medical treatment for the community. Some opportunities in the public health actions that one can take. So opportunities that can exist to are partnering with faith-based organizations such as temples, mosques, and gurdwaras. These are hubs where the communities can meet and thus are trusted by the community with leaders that they can go to for advice and look up to. Furthermore, culturally tailored and multilingual programs can be implemented in languages such as Bengali, Hindi, Urdu, and Punjabi, and this will really help bridge health literacy gaps. Additionally, policy level advocacy can also increase access to preventative screening and funding for culturally responsive healthcare. Right. Threats and ongoing challenges that programs trying to aid this issue may face. For one, financial barriers and rising living costs limit access to healthy food and exercise options for the community. Thus, it becomes a cycle of low, high expenses lead to low access to healthy foods and proper exercise and diet, and which further exacerbates risk. And many community members also experience long work hours and occupational stress, and ongoing pollution in the city, stigma, and insufficient funding for long-term programs remain big challenges. Okay. Communication strategies. To address these issues, communication must be culturally appropriate and accessible. This includes using plain language, bilingual materials, and multiple languages from these cultures, as well as using trustworthy community channels. As mentioned before, religious leaders, community leaders are great sources to dispel information to certain communities. Furthermore, modes of communication can be through WhatsApp groups, ethnic radio stations, and as mentioned before, religious centers or community centers. All of these are powerful avenues for engagement and can really bring the community together to help combat this disease. However, it is very important to note that while communicating help for programs such as this, the tone must be kept respectful, inclusive, and empowering. Prevention and mitigation. I believe that prevention starts with culturally sensitive education, both for providers and clinicians, as well as for policymakers as well. It is important to have family-based interventions to encourage collective participation of all members of the community in healthy exercise and healthy eating as well. And the similar thread for healthy eating and diet, modified recipes and traditional meals can be made cardiovascular disease preventative. And additionally, stress management workshops and mental health workshops can be integrated and advocated for to limit any further exacerbating risk factors that can contribute to the onset of this disease. Some recommendations for public health is one, to increase funding, as policymakers should expand insurance and preventative care access. And community organizations should be trained with bilingual educators and peer mentors to foster cultural competency and sensitivity. Healthcare providers need cultural humility and sensitivity training to better serve the South Asian populations. And again, stable funding is always needed to ensure that these programs are lasting for long term and success. To summarize, cardiovascular disease among South Asians in New York is driven by a mix of genetics, culture, and environment. Public health solutions must therefore be community-based, culturally competent, and sustainable to be long-lasting and successful. Thus, I believe through education, policy change, and collaboration with multiple avenues of people, we can reduce these disparities and promote a healthy heart health for the community. So my references, thank you so much.